Okay. Well, welcome everybody to part 5 of our series. We're ready to ring up the curtain. And this is Restoration, the Nehemiah Story, part 5. Well, just to remind you what's happened so far, Nehemiah is supervising the rebuilding of the walls of Jerusalem. He has permission from King Artaxerxes to be there, and the people all agree to help rebuild the wall. The opposition has already tried 2 strategies to stop him, but the walls are halfway done. So now let's pick up the story. Part 5 is progress. That's good. It's always good to hear progress, but the enemy is also making progress, believe me. So let's just look again at the enemy's strategies. Well, they had 5 different strategies to defeat Nehemiah. Sanballat, Tobiah, and then he had a whole group of people that he kept collecting to be on his side. And they tried mockery, they tried attack, distraction, intimidation, and manipulation. And already they've tried 2 of those. They shot 2 bullets out of their, I was going to say 6-shooter, maybe it's a 5-shooter. Actually, I think they were arrows. They've shot 2 arrows out of their quiver, and both of them missed the mark as far as Nehemiah was concerned. But now they're trying the 3rd one, which is distraction. And you'll notice that it's a little more subtle than the others. The others were like full-on attack. Now this is getting more subtle and trying to distract him. We'll see what happens. Well, the story tells us, the scripture tells us, Sanballat, Tobiah, Geshem, the Arab, and the rest of our enemies found out that I had finished rebuilding the wall. No gaps remained, though we had not yet set up the doors and the gates. So Sanballat and Geshem sent a message asking me to meet them at one of the villages in the plain of Omo. Sounds harmless enough, I suppose, but what could be their reason for doing this? Why do they want to invite me? I think maybe they want to distract me from my task, or may even attack me while I'm away from Jerusalem. Let me pray about that. I realized, Nehemiah continues, they were plotting to harm me, so I sent this message. I am engaged in a great work, so I cannot come. I am engaged in a great work, so I cannot come. Why should I stop working to come and meet with you? Good question. 4 times they sent the same message, and each time I gave the same reply. Come to Ono? Oh no, I'm not going to fall for that one. I am engaged in a great work. He says this to them. And that brings a question to each one of us. What can distract you and me from our God-given tasks? Now you may say, oh, I don't have anything great I'm doing for God, but you'd be surprised. And you know, I've thought about this and I realized that the less important you think your task is, the easier it is to be distracted. A distraction comes along, oh, I'm not doing anything important, I can stop that. You know, but God says anything that He gives you to do is a great work, and you need to do it with all your strength and your might and your concentration and your focus, and do it as unto Him, and don't be distracted. Well, Nehemiah certainly wasn't going to be distracted by the tactics of the enemy. So there, another one of their arrows went astray. Well, they've got two more. And the next one is intimidation, getting a little more subtle and a little more threatening. The fifth time Sanballat's servant came with an open letter in his hand, and this is what it said. There is a rumor among the surrounding nations. Well, let's look at that. The fifth time, boy, they are persistent. They didn't give up. And then it was an open letter this time, not just to him, but something open that anybody could listen to. Of course, a lot of people didn't read in those days, so they read these things aloud to people. And so they made it more, uh, it went out to a lot more people this time, more widespread. And of course, they mention a rumor. And this was absolutely entirely a false rumor. But it didn't matter because sometimes when people hear a rumor, they don't really consider whether it's correct or not. They just believe what they want to believe. And so they were counting on this. And then he says, and Geshem, no, the letter says, and Geshem tells me it is true that you and the Jews are planning to rebel, and that is why you are building the wall. According to his reports, you plan to be their king. Now, this is absolute nonsense, and Nehemiah knows it's nonsense, it's false. But what about all the other people who are building the wall? Could somebody think, I've been doing all this work for the building the wall, and now I'm finding out it's just because Nehemiah wants to be a king and rule over us. Well, that's how these rumors go, and it's very subtle, even though it's completely false. And many of the politicians know that if you say the wrong thing enough times, everybody will believe you. You can be very sure, it continues, that this report will get back to the king, that's Artaxerxes. So I suggest that you come and talk it over with me. Now he's adding lies and baseless threats because he knows that this is not going to go back to Artaxerxes because Artaxerxes will want some proof of that. His favorite cupbearer is out there working and they are saying false things about him. It wouldn't wash at all. So Nehemiah knows that this is not going to work. So how did Nehemiah respond? He simply replied, there is no truth in any part of your story. You are making up the whole thing. He didn't try to be politically correct or say it in a nice way. He just told them right out that he knew there was nothing true about their story. Kind of fake news type thing. They were just trying to intimidate us, imagining that they could discourage us and stop the work. Okay. So what was their strategy? Intimidate everybody. And who were they intimidating? He says, us. Now, Nehemiah could have said they were trying to intimidate me, which they were, but they were also had an open letter, so they were trying to intimidate everybody. And they were all in this together. And then, what was the goal? The goal was to stop the work. And Nehemiah recognized that. They want to stop the work. Don't stop. Before World War II, Neville Chamberlain, who was the Prime Minister in England, went over to visit Hitler in Germany. And he came back with a paper and he said, now we're going to have peace in our time because Hitler has promised not to attack any more countries. When Winston Churchill, who succeeded him, heard that, he was furious and he said, "You never try to negotiate with the enemy. The enemy is not going to listen, and he's going to just tell you more lies." Well, Nehemiah knew that he couldn't negotiate with this enemy who all they wanted to do was stop the work. So what is Nehemiah going to do? He could have thought, well, what's the use of fighting them? They never give up. But that's not what he did at all. He says, "So I continued the work with ever greater determination." I continued the work with even greater determination. Well, one more arrow, and that is manipulation. So they would didn't the frontal attack didn't work, so now they get somebody else to do their dirty work. Later, I went to see Shemaiah. He said, "Let us meet inside the temple of God and bolt the door shut. Your enemies are coming to kill you tonight." But I replied, "No, I won't do it." I realized that God had not spoken to him. He had uttered this prophecy against me because Tobiah and Sanballat had hired him. They were hoping to make me sin. Then they would be able to accuse and discredit me. And so he recognized what was happening. And here was Shebaniah, whom he knew, and he had gone to visit him because he was housebound. He had problems with his legs and so forth. And so he went to do a good deed to him, and this is what he got. And he realized that this was not the right kind of advice to get because it was paid for by Tobiah and Sanballat. So he had this insight, and it reminds us, before you follow someone else's advice, always ask God to give you discernment. There are some people that are very good at giving advice, and there may be people that are highly honored in the community, or there may be people who have good ideas about the ways of the world and how to do things and so forth. And there may even be people who are looked upon as being quite spiritual. But no matter who they are, when they give you some advice, always stop and ask God to give you discernment. That's what Nehemiah did. He had discernment. Well, I used to travel around in an old car. This is years ago, and it got me where I wanted to go, but it wasn't really a very nice looking car. It had some dents in it, and it was just a small little car, little VW Bug. And somebody said to me one time, "You're a Christian, and that makes you a child of the King. And do you think a child of the King would drive around in a car like that? You should be in a nice, shiny Cadillac or some other nice car that a king would ride around in." I thought, that sounds right, doesn't it? Well, then I asked for discernment, and I felt that God was saying, look, what did Jesus do when he went into Jerusalem in his triumphal entry? He could have ridden a white horse, which is what the Roman generals would ride when they came back from their wars with all their prisoners and their soldiers and everything, and they made this triumphal march into the city, and they were on a white horse. Well, Jesus chose a donkey. So I think I should have called my car the donkey, because that was the equivalent of Jesus' donkey. Well, we do need discernment when we get advice, because sometimes it's not given with the right motive. All right, they have shot all their arrows, and all of them have missed. And so he says, on October the 2nd, the war was finished, just 52 days after we had begun. Celebration. I don't think they had fireworks in those days, but if they did, I'm sure they would have used them. And so he says, when our enemies and the surrounding nations heard about it, they were frightened and humiliated. They realized this work had been done with the help of our God. All right, it took less than 3 months to do, and they got it done. The first group was there 13 years, and nothing was done. And I wondered about that, but I realized again that this was God's timing, because God had allowed a foreign army to come in and conquer Jerusalem, knock the walls down, destroy the temple, burn everything, and take most of the people away into captivity and just leave a pitiful number of people behind who were in subjection to them, and had people like Tobiah and Sanballat in charge. And so I think this was God's timing, and it was just the right time, and Nehemiah was ready to be used as part of getting the city of Jerusalem ready for the people to come back. Well, it says the enemies were humiliated. Now that is very interesting, because you remember originally the Jews were in disgrace. When Nehemiah heard this story right at the beginning of the book from his friends, they said, the walls are down, the gates are burned, and the people are in disgrace. So now he's saying the enemies are in disgrace. And remember, Tobiah and Sanballat, they started mocking the Jews and saying, oh, these poor feeble Jews, what do they think they're going to do? Well, now the tables have been turned, and he gives God the credit. Nehemiah could have said, well, I persisted, I worked hard, I got everybody together, I gave them pep talks, I got permission from the king, I got all this stuff together, and if it wasn't for me, nothing would have been done. It might be true in one sense, but still, he gives God the credit where it's due. All right, take home time. Be focused. Be focused. Don't be distracted. The enemy loves to distract us. Remember that you're doing a great work. Be fearless. Stand against the attack of the enemy. Don't give in. Be faithful. Don't be manipulated or distracted by the enemy. Just be faithful to God. Look to him, and he will enable you to do the job that he's given you to do. And remember this all the time. We are on the winning side. Well, we put all those away, and next time we'll ask ourselves, what did we learn? So it's time to bring the curtain down, and thank you for listening. And I hope that you have a wonderful, great week, and may God bless you.